included, the art forms are not structured. They have form, but not structure. I'll just give you a simple example that you see, you can potentially sing a rag for nth number of hours. It's a limit of the musician, of the imagination of the musician, which puts an end to a work of music. So it's not structuring, and in that sense, Mani was very clear, and he would say that in all the pagan traditions, in India included, we have forms, and we don't have structure. Therefore, this very smart sentence of this filmmaker Godard, who says that the middle, beginning, middle, and the end you need in all works of art, but maybe in all kinds of sequences, because there is no question of sequence here, and so this is one, which means that we have form in work of arts, and you can take any number of examples of our narrative traditions, our musical tradition, our dance traditions, and all other traditions of the art, which means we don't have an idea of a fixed closure. So the work of art is not practiced keeping that closure in mind, which means in Indian art forms we don't have an idea of a climax. You see, this climax idea of a climax came even in Europe very late. It came in with the Renaissance. And in Renaissance, it came first in painting, which was called linear perspective. So what happens is that the space is organized in a way in linear perspective so that the entire image, entire space is moving towards a vanishing point, which is sometimes in Renaissance painters, it will be center of the painting. And the arrangement would be such that the close objects are actually big in size, and as you move away, of course in your mind, the size goes on being reduced and up to a certain vanishing point comes. Now that translated into narrative becomes climax, because climax is a point where the resolution takes place, that you move towards climax. And the greatest example of the is a Hollywood cinema that that all Hollywood cinema, they move towards a certain climax. So there is conflict in between, and this conflict goes on being intensified and goes on intensified, and at the end, there is some kind of end resolution, so the climax. And if you remember, I remember from my childhood, then when I would go to see a film, and if I have reached there 5 minutes before the film, the gatekeeper will tell me that, sir, just wait for 5 more minutes because final fight is taking place. So fight is a climax there, because so if there is no climax, the climax is like a utopia within the work of art. That resolution would take place in the end, so everything gets resolved. Now, in pagan traditions like India, their forms are not created like that. There are no actual absolute climaxes in most of the works of art, and therefore there is always a possibility of elaborating on something. And that's why even today you have, like what Shashikant is working on, there's a lot of Mahabharats, and you can just go on elaborating one after the other. So there is this idea of upaj, or the badhat in music also, that there can be and the forms are there, of course, but there's no structuring. Now, I think a very fine concept that Navjoti gave was an idea of an akshar, of course, to which he referred as punctuator. Now, Navjoti used to say, it's a great sentence, I think, that the Indian modernity has equated akshar with Brahman, because in Gita 3 words come, Uttam Purush, Akshar and Kshar. So Kshar, of course, is the world, which is Ksharanshil, and Brahma, Uttam Purush, is Brahman. But what is this Akshar? as he said, it's a contentless form. Now, it's a contentless form, but a form which makes the happening possible, which is also by Shankaracharya called the Maya Bij. So it's a seed. Now, if I bring in, I not being a philosopher, I'm a writer, I work like a bricolage, just taking things from here and there. So in Abhinavgupta, somewhere he said that when do you write? So the answer to when do you write is when you are filled with a certain bhav and the spilling takes place. So when you are filled, so therefore writing is not a mechanical activity in that sense. You cannot plan it. You get filled with a certain emotion, certain ideas, or I don't know what should it be called. It's a very complex thing that you are filled with. And certainly the spilling, what Abhinavgupta says spilling, I would say that at a certain point in spilling, filling up of the form up to the neck as if, an akshar appears in the work of art and immediately separates. And these akshar, one after the other, come up in the minds of the artist and the elaboration takes place. Because, as Navjyoti once said, that the task of the akshar is to disclose. You are disclosing one after the other. Bhavas, so bhav. So the bhav gets disclosed in all details and you go on and on and on. So therefore there's no question of climax then. This elaboration can take place because this bhav is potentially infinite because it has an infinite dimension. So you go on. So the akshar there, the theory of the punctuator or the akshara, makes it possible for explaining why, because with the theory of akshar being internalized by the artist in whatever ways that they might have done in cultures like India, that the task is to disclose as much as you can of the reality of that bhava or whatever that emotion is or meta emotion, and you go on doing that. So therefore, it is because that akshar comes in the minds of the artist, a very particular mind that he or she would have, that a certain kind of akshar would appear and a certain kind of form will be elaborated upon, which need not move towards a certain closure or towards a certain climax. And I think it's one of the reasons that why in the mind of Navjyoti, when he explains about whenever he was talking about the arts, he would say that how the Natya Shastra came into being, for example, and it is all connected to this idea of the elaboration and this idea of the disclosure. And he used to say, he told it to me, I'm just in the process of making a book out of that, of Navjyoti, of course, is that he said that in the Satyuga, and all these yugas, of course, they go together. This is a kind of imagination, and you put your thoughts in the stories. So therefore, this whole is a wonderful narrative, and one should not try to find the historical evidences for having those various yugas. It's a certain kind of an imagination of the world. Anyway, so he said that in Satyuga, all the pursuit that the people were carrying out and all the dharma, therefore, they were all, carrying out, they were complementary to each other. They were not coming, there were no friction between the dharmas of various, pursuers. Now, suddenly one fault came into that, one truti, as Navjyoti puts it, comes into that, and that is the truti that suddenly there is sukh and dukh, and there is this longing for the sukh and the tiraskara of the dukh. So he goes, and the person goes towards, tries to move towards this sukha and then tries to negate or in fact abandon the dukkha. So this question comes, and this gets resolved in the invention by Bharat Muni by Krida. So the Natya Shastra comes into being. So the Natya Shastra then brings into play the Sukh and Dukh, and this continues in Treta for long. And as he said, that all the characters are actually like the the skandhas, the collection of the maryadas. So there is in the Krida there is a struggle of various maryadas unfolding, and it can unfold till infinity as if. And the resolution it lies in the fact that the samajik, even the word samaj, actually has come from Kama Sutra. The samajik is the word, is the person who gets immersed while seeing a work of art, because he or she gets rid of oneself, one's individual ego, and delivers herself or himself into pure sakshitva. So you are, yeah, fine. I'm just finishing it. So then at that level, at the level of the sakshi, of the level of the audience or the reader, this problem of the sukha dukkha gets resolved. But at the end, later part of the this yuga, certainly Love and Kush are able to identify a truti, a fault, and that is that only by Maryada, which the Ram is like Maryada Purushottam, he carries out his life only through Maryadas, there is a truti, and the truti is that the decision that he had to take to abandon Sita for the sake of the people, for the sake of the lok. So that conflict comes up, and the idea is that the Maryada itself cannot resolve this problem of not having complementarity in the dharmas of the people. So now the next resolution is of the Dwapar, where Mahabharata comes into being, and he said that resolution is that now the discussion, the sabhas, the big sabhas will be organized, and people will talk to each other, and through the discussions and all that samvadas. So therefore in Mahabharata you have these series of samvads, and if I remember correctly, Dharampal was extremely interested in making a collection of all the samvadas which are there in Mahabharata. So the samvad take place, and through the samvad the Dwapars, once again the re-establishment of the complementarity of the the dharmas take place and all that. But even that resolution at the end of Mahabharata comes to an end, and you suddenly enter into, because with the end of the Mahabharata, Dwapar ends, and you come into the Kali Yuga. And in Kali Yuga, for example, there are various possible resolutions which are being practiced. Now, if you see all that, I'm not going to elaborate on that. I mean, of course, he said that one is a semantic resolution where a person is iconized, so the Pegambar and Christ and Moses, etc., or a certain bigger than the humanity values, so all the philosophical traditions, all democracy for that matter, which far is much bigger, and that becomes the arbiter of the values and the dharmas. So these various, or the city-states, for example, in the Greek tradition, that only few people have the right to pursue excellence, the rest are the supporting system, and all these things. His idea of the modern times is that there is a conflict between all these three, etc. What I'm trying to say is that with this akshar as the punctuator, as the creative force, as if, there is, in a sense, in Navjyoti's thought, there is always a question of the pursuing, there is always a question of elaborating or searching one after the other possible resolution, and there is no final utopia that he proposes which can be implemented on world as such, which will in the end resolve all the questions. Thank you.